Your dog is looking at you right now, maybe from across the room, maybe from beside your chair, maybe just glancing up for a moment before looking away. And you've always assumed exactly what they see when they do that. A person, their owner. Someone who feeds them and walks them and loves them. What if that assumption is wrong? Not in a small way, in a fundamental way that changes how you understand everything your dog does around you, every single day. Researchers who study canine cognition have spent decades trying to answer one specific question. When your dog looks at you, what are they actually looking at? Not what do they feel, what do they register? What category do they place you in? And the answer that's emerging from the science is significantly stranger and significantly more meaningful than most dog owners have ever been told. Let's start with the explanation almost everyone holds, because it seems so obvious it barely registers as an assumption at all. You are a person. Your dog knows you are a person. They can see that. They understand the difference between humans and dogs and the rest of the world, and they slot you neatly into the human category and respond to you accordingly. But here's the problem with that. If dogs processed humans as simply a separate species, recognizable but fundamentally foreign, you would expect their behavior toward us to reflect that distance. Polite, functional, cooperative perhaps, but not emotionally dependent, not attachment-driven, not the way they actually behave. What we actually observe is something that doesn't fit that framework at all. In 2013, researchers at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest published findings using the same attachment testing method originally developed for human infants, the strange situation procedure, applied to family dogs and their owners. What they found was that dogs treated their owners as what researchers call a secure base, not simply a food provider or a friendly human, but a specific individual whose presence allowed them to explore freely and whose absence caused genuine distress that the presence of any other human could not resolve. This is not how any species behaves toward members of a different group they recognize as foreign. This is how infants behave toward parents. This is how deeply bonded members of the same social group behave toward each other. The Budapest team concluded that dogs had essentially mapped human caregivers onto the same internal template they would use for a primary attachment figure within their own species, but extended it across the species boundary. You aren't being processed as an alien life form that happens to be kind. You're being processed as a member of their group, their family unit, their pack, in the most literal neurological sense of that word. But here's where it gets considerably more interesting, because the story doesn't stop at social categorization. Attila Andix and his research team at Eötvös Loránd University took this further. Using fMRI brain scanning on dogs, a remarkable technical achievement requiring months of training for the dogs to lie still inside an MRI machine, they found that dogs process human voices using the same brain regions that human brains use to process voices. Not similar regions, the same regions. They also found that the dog brain, like the human brain, responds differently to emotional content in voices, picking up on the effective quality of what you say, not just the words themselves. What this means is that when you speak to your dog, they are not simply registering that noise is happening. They are processing your voice through a neural architecture designed specifically for decoding socially meaningful sound from members of their group, the same architecture they use to process the sounds of other dogs. You have been admitted, at the level of brain processing, into the category of entities whose communications matter. This changes what your dog is doing when they look at your face, which turns out to be something researchers have spent considerable effort studying in its own right. Research from the University of Lincoln in the United Kingdom found that dogs can spontaneously recognize and respond appropriately to human emotional expressions, distinguishing between happy and angry human faces and adjusting their behavior accordingly, without ever being specifically trained to do so. Dogs do not perform this kind of emotional reading with unfamiliar species. They do it with members of their social world. In extending this ability to human faces, they are treating you as someone whose emotional state is relevant to their own, the way any highly social animal tracks the mood of its group members. There is one more layer to this that most people find the most surprising of all. Researchers studying canine social perception have noted something that seems almost too specific to be real. Dogs pay particular attention to the eye region of human faces, not the mouth, not the nose, the eyes, the same region that is most socially and emotionally informative in human-to-human interaction, and in dog-to-dog interaction as well. Eye tracking studies published in the journal Animal Cognition found that dogs scan human faces in a pattern that prioritizes the upper face, consistent with seeking emotional and attentional information. This isn't random. This is targeted social reading. You are not being observed the way a dog might observe a piece of furniture, or a moving car, or a stranger on the other side of a fence. You are being read, actively and continuously, for social information that your dog uses to calibrate their own behavior, the same way they would read the body language of any other member of the group they belong to. There is a practical implication here that most owners never connect to this research. When your dog follows you from room to room, it isn't obsessive or anxious by default. When they check your face before approaching something new, they aren't being timid. When they bring you a toy even though you haven't asked for anything, they aren't confused about what toys are for. These behaviors make complete sense when you understand that you have been categorized, not as a provider of services, but as a fellow social being whose presence carries meaning. This also reframes one of the most common mistakes dog owners make without realizing it. Many people assume that because they are a different species, their emotional state won't register with their dog in any precise or detailed way. The research suggests the opposite is true. Your dog reads your face and voice for emotional content with the same neural machinery they use to read other dogs, which means the anxiety you're trying to hide, the frustration you're trying to contain, and the sadness you haven't mentioned to anyone, your dog has likely already registered all of it, in some form, before you've said a word. They aren't responding to what you choose to show them. They're responding to what you're actually feeling, because they're reading you the same way they'd read any member of their social group. There is one thing worth paying attention to here, particularly if you live with an older dog or one who has recently begun to ignore your eye contact or facial expressions after previously responding to them consistently. A sudden decrease in face-directed attention or social referencing behavior, checking your face less, tracking your movements less closely, can in some cases be an early behavioral marker for canine cognitive dysfunction. Dogs who have always oriented toward their owner's face as a social anchor may begin to lose that orientation as cognitive function changes. If this shift feels different from simple independence, it is worth raising with a veterinarian. So the next time your dog looks at you from across the room, here is what is actually happening in that moment. A nervous system shaped by tens of thousands of years of living alongside humans is scanning your face for emotional information. The same brain region that processes socially meaningful voices in dogs is active and listening to whatever sound you might make. And somewhere in their social cognition, in the category of beings whose presence means safety and whose absence means loss, your name is there. You are not their owner in the way you might own a piece of furniture, or even the way you care for a plant. You are, in the most literal sense that behavioral neuroscience can currently confirm, a member of their family. Not because they don't know you're human, but because to them that distinction may matter far less than the one they've already made, that you belong to them and they belong to you. If this changed how you think about the next time your dog looks at you, subscribe and leave a comment below. What does your dog do that now makes more sense after watching this?